Welcome back to another episode of the Sky Society podcast. Today I'm chatting with Girly Baum. She is a freelance marketer, just started her own agency, working primarily with influencers and partnerships, and previously has a long history working at luxury fashion brands. She's been the senior PR manager at Burberry, Hermès, and Louis Vuitton. Welcome to the podcast, Girly.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much. I am excited to jump in and go through your journey. You have worked at a lot of different places and have so much experience in a very unique niche. So I'm excited to jump into that. But before we do, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes. So my name is Girly. I have been in luxury PR for the past 12 years. I kind of started, working right out of college, and have worked with big mega brands. And then also sort of now I'm transitioning into working with smaller brands. I spent the most of my time in New York. And then most recently I am between New York and Tel Aviv now. So a fun, unique working situation for me too. So yeah.
And you're getting married next month, correct?
Married next month. Yes, we were just chatting about that. So that's a little bit of extra stress thrown in there. But it's all really exciting. It's going to be small and intimate, and yeah, I'm excited. So it's actually been funny. Like planning the wedding is all of my like past experience working, with brands and events. Like I have a wedding planner and I'm basically not letting her do anything. I'm probably like everyone's worst nightmare. I'm like, it's fine. I got it. It's already done. Like I've already printed everything. So definitely been a fun experience. So yeah.
All of your like career comes together to help you like basically put this wedding toget's.
Yes. I'm like, this is not my first rodeo, like first wedding, but I'm a seasoned at doing events. So yeah, it's been fun, but it's doing it in a different country. So
what country?
Yeah, so we're getting married in Tel Aviv. So it's also been interesting, like not speaking the language and not really knowing, New York or, LA. I know everywhere to go and who to talk to. And it's been like a fun way to get to know the city. So
amazing. Yeah. Okay, well, we're gonna get into all of that and why you moved there in a little bit. But I want to rewind a little bit because you had a past life as a ballet dancer. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. So I feel like my life has been split into two parts. So I started dancing when I was 3, like most little girls, your mom puts you in ballet classes. And I ended up being good at it and I liked it. So I had, a bit of a different adolescence. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. I left home when I was 16 to do a training program with Houston Ballet. And I also trained at the School of American Ballet in New York. And it's kind of what you do when you are trying to be a professional ballet dancer, especially if you live in a small town like me. The training's better. You kind of are in a rigorous schedule, basically 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then I would do school online and I would have tutors. So my last 2 years of high school were spent doing online and really sort of and then my last year of high school, I was dancing professionally. And then I took a year off between high school and college and danced professionally as well. And then my parents were smart enough to make me go to college, which in hindsight, I'm very grateful that
Did you not want to at the time?
I think I was very resistant to it. When you want to, dance professionally, like those are your golden years. The deal was if I didn't get this one job that I really wanted, then I had to go to college. But I danced in college and I was able to keep it up and was going to continue auditioning and trying to dance again when I went to New York, and had injuries. And I just felt like 22 was the right time to sort of, stop dancing and try and transition to more of like the professional world. And I was like, well, all my friends are doing it. They're all starting over. Everyone's graduating college. So I should, I was good, but I wasn't amazing. And I knew that. And I knew that I wanted to be in New York City and I wasn't really going to be able to dance with New York City Ballet or American Ballet Theater. And so I figured if I can't be in one of the very, very best, then I'll transition. And
I want to pause there for a second because you said something there. I knew I was good, but I knew I wasn't the best. I feel like that's something that's applicable to like other areas in life that a lot of people face. How was that for you? Was it something that was kind of like easy to accept? Was it hard to make that realization that you weren't going to, get that dream New York Ballet career, or how was that for you?
It was really tough. I think it was like a whole identity crisis a bit. I had to come to it myself, and I had like some really bad injuries. Sorry, it's my fiance coming in. I had some really bad injuries the year before I moved to New York, and I kind of was like kept struggling to sort of come back from it. And I came to the decision on my own, but it took a couple years. I think it was like me fighting it for a really long time. And it took me a while to get over also. I think that I had this whole identity of like, I was a ballet dancer. This is who I am. This is what I do. And like everything else is not as hard or foreign. And so I'm just going to sort of like lean on that still my identity. But I'm trying something new sort of. But lots of therapy, lots of talking. Yeah. And I also think it's like, I really got the opportunity to do something that I really enjoyed more than going into a ballet studio every single day, and something that I was still really passionate about. And so I think that also made it a lot easier. It's like I was living in New York, and not to like, I know we're talking about career, but I ended up getting an internship with Badgley Mischka, and I was like getting to work on fashion shows and getting to like drop shoes off at Vogue. And I thought it was like the coolest thing in the entire world. So I think that made it a lot easier for me. It was like this whole new environment and this whole new world that I had nothing really, I didn't know so much about other than being an admirer. And I knew that I was a hard worker. But yeah, it was really tough. I don't think I got over it for like another 10 years after that.
Yes, I can only imagine. And that, I mean, in that space, that's like to an extreme, but I know there's similar things. I know I had friends in college that wanted to be doctors and had to realize like, there's, I think like a period in whatever in college where they kind of like weed out, right? Like the people that are, and you have to accept, okay, like I can't do this route. Like I have to change. And some people who want to do that since they were little kids have to then say, okay, like, I needed to switch career paths. And that's definitely a really hard pill to swallow sometimes. So but yeah, I think kind of maybe what you said of you focused on something new and something different, and you got to have another exciting path in your life. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got that first internship?
Yes, it's like I'm not a Nepo baby, but as like, kind of like you have to know someone to know someone, I think, especially because I was coming at it from, I had all this professional experience as opposed to like being a dancer, and I had a degree, but I had no office experience. I had no fashion experience. And my first internship was at Badgley Mischka, and Mark Badgley and James Mischka are the designers and their partners, and they love riding horses, and they ride horses with my uncle. So it was like, he was like, here's Mark's cell phone number, call him and like see if he'll talk to you. And I remember I had like just moved to New York, and I was so nervous, and I didn't know like what I was going to do. And I sat down in Washington Square Park with my mom, and I called him, and he was like the nicest, like, he was like, hey, like, do you want to come be my intern? And I was like, yeah, like, this is the best thing ever. And this was kind of like before, you could work in New York City as an intern and not get paid and not have school credit. Like I was just there every day. And, but it was the best, it was the best learning experience. And I kind of had this freedom to go in, and I would, he'd be like, oh, okay, like go in the pattern room and have this, like the ladies teach you how to make a pattern and trace a pattern for a dress. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, and then you kind of go and figure it out. And I kind of had this like few weeks to kind of play around in each department and see what I really gravitated towards, and also like to see who gravitated towards me. And I think I actually ended up interning there for a solid year. But I remember after, you know, I had like gotten my footing, and it was like 9 months, and we had like a fashion show or something. And, you know, the other, you know, the head of PR said to me, he was like, you know, no one wanted to work with you. We thought you were like a spoiled brat that rode horses. I ride horses. I've never ridden a horse. You know, that, you know, was like a family friend and wasn't going to work hard. And you were like the hardest worker and prove everyone wrong. And I think like that was my biggest thing of, I think, really being a ballet dancer, of like, if you're on time, you're late, you know? So like, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, don't even show up. So I would come in really early in the morning, and I would like research things, and I just kind of like ate it all up. And I had the best time, and they were just like the nicest. They're the nicest guys in the business. And you know, I think the fashion industry has this like notorious reputation for being a toxic work environment, and it most definitely is. But there, it's the complete opposite. It's like a family, and everyone is so kind and lovely, and it's just like a pleasure to be there every day. So I had like a really lucky first experience. And then
And that was oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
So this was the start. So you mentioned the PR director came and talked to you, and then after this was kind of where your PR career catapulted. And I just wanted to touch on what you had mentioned there about how you poured your all into that internship. I feel like sometimes we're in a different culture now. That internship was like 10, 12 years ago. And now we're in very much of a, you know, work-life balance, and all those things are super great. But I also feel like the piece of the equation that I find a lot of girls will struggle with is being able to put in that like extra hard work, and doing those little things like showing up early and working extra, coming in and doing your own research outside of the role. And so when you go there, you're showing up your best. Doesn't mean you need to participate in toxic work culture, but also just knowing that like working really hard still has a place, and still is something that, like you said, it turned everyone's like perception of you around.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, I think that I shouldn't have used the term talk. I mean, the fashion industry it's a tough, really tough industry. And I think that toxic work culture gets thrown around a lot. And I think like you said it perfectly. It doesn't mean that because you're working really hard, that it's a toxic environment. You know, I think that you can still like work really hard and come in early and do everything. Yeah. I think that, you know, I see interns now, and you know, you ask them to do something, they're like, I can't, I'm leaving. I was like, I would never, ever say that. Like, even doing, you know, even now, like 10, 12 years in, if anyone asks me to do anything, I still like, I can't, you know, if I can't do it right away, then I'll be like, you know, I'll do it when I get home or whatever it is. It's just, it's a very different, time now. But I think just showing up and doing your best, and like people do notice it. It's also like being genuinely interested in it. Like I just was genuinely wanted to be there. Which makes a big difference, because it's also very obvious when someone is in the room and doesn't want to be there. So
yes. And I think maybe the thing that we're getting here is doing not just what's expected of you. Because I think like now we're in a place where, okay, like I also have episodes where we talk about the importance of being able to say no to things, and, you know, not, so it's this balance that you have to figure out. But I do like one piece of advice that I do give to people that are looking to get you know, that I've given to people wanting a promotion, or like, how can I get a raise, or, you know, I want to move forward, is like, don't just do what's expected of you. And I think that, because that is the bare minimum, kind of like what you said, showing up on time is late, showing up, you know, that's basically kind of the same thing. It's like doing what you're supposed to do isn't, you know, that's just the bare minimum, and that you should really strive to do more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I kind of, I was there for a year. And then I was like, I think I want to be a stylist. And we had a stylist, her name was Annabelle Tolman, that she would style the Badgley Mishka shows. And she had this woman, Melina Gilchrist, who I think she's the fashion director of the Gentlewoman magazine now. She was at T Magazine for a long time. she definitely doesn't remember doing this. And like, I credit everything to her. I think I've told her once before. But I had mentioned to her, I was like, yeah, I think I want to, be a stylist. And she pulled me, she like grabbed my hand and pulled me towards Annabelle. And she was like, Annabelle, Carly is really interested in styling. And, she like have her come intern with you a couple days a week. And so that's sort of like how I got in working with Annabelle. And I would work, we did like a job with the Kardashians, and we would work with, like, oh my God, there were so many different jobs. She had like, at the time she had just stopped working with the Olsen twins, and she was like the celebrity stylist in 2010. And I owe a lot of my career to her. They were the ones, she and her assistant were the ones that recommended me for the assistant job at Christian Louboutin. So that was like my first like real job where I had a paycheck and I wasn't just an intern. I was, an actual assistant. And, every job that I've gotten as we sort of like talk through all of my experience, has really been through people that I know or I've met along the way. And, especially in New York, especially in the fashion industry, it's like everyone talks, everyone knows everyone knows of like, okay, this person's leaving here, this is happening here. And if you're nice and you're hardworking, and I think people want to work with nice, hardworking people. I think that's just like as simple as that. Yeah. So my first real job was a PR assistant at Christian Louboutin. And I remember like, it was the 20th anniversary. And I basically like, I would do sample send outs all day long. So if, you're not really familiar with like the sort of weird, crazy fashion world, there's samples that you have of, clothes or shoes, of, Christian Louboutin shoes, that we would have, a size run of every single style. And like Vogue would email saying, we have a cover shoot with Rihanna, can we get every size 41 you have in every pump you have? So I would physically take them, pack them up, send them out, get them to Vogue, then like call them back, and then you would do all the credit checks. It's also like when magazines were still sort of end all be all, like Instagram had just started, and it just was a totally different world where it was like everyone lived and died by magazines. And then I would also do that with all the celebrities. So, at the time, I think it was like Rachel Zoe was still styling, and like Rachel Zoe's team would email and they would say, we've got, I don't know who her clients were at the time, we've got so-and-so going to the Oscars, like, can we get all these sizes and shoes and stuff? So that was kind of what I did for a year. And I loved it. I had the best time. And randomly on LinkedIn, someone from HR at Louis Vuitton emailed me, or, emailed me on LinkedIn and said, we have a women's assistant role open. Would you be interested in coming to hear about the role? And I was like, okay, like, I really wanted to work with clothes, but I didn't really see myself at Louis Vuitton. And I think that's always kind of like the jobs you get when the ones you're not really like trying so hard, you don't care as much. Like I was trying and I was really putting my best foot forward, and I was happy where I was. And I think that goes for like anything in life, for dating, for friendships, for jobs, whatever it is like, it gives off this, like, just this vibe of, I don't need this, and in the best possible way. But I ended up really loving like everyone that I met with and the team, and the head of the PR, the director of PR at Louis Vuitton at the time, also was a ballet dancer like me. So I really think that, she gave me that job because I I had like a very similar background to her, and we really bonded, and I'm still very close with her to this day. And you know, but I also know that Annabelle Tolman, she recommended me for the job, and it's like all of these things, like you'll see there's like a building block that like everyone I meet was then like kind of pushing me forward. And I think that that's also like a very New York thing, that no one got anywhere in New York without someone helping them. So I'm always like, yeah.
Or you touched on a lot of different things there. I want to say, so you mentioned that you had the history in ballet that helped you get this like role at Vuitton. I want to highlight that because I am a big advocate for sharing personal things about yourself in interviews. And I feel like, especially for young women that are a little bit, you know, more nervous in the interview process, it feels like that's kind of like off limits. Like I need to just like stick to my professional work, and that's like the most important. But if you hadn't like maybe talked about your ballet history or opened up and shared stuff that was outside of what your career, you wouldn't have made that connection with that, you know, the hiring manager there at Louis Vuitton.
Yeah, I'm like a huge advocate of telling your personal story, and maybe to a fault. Like I wear all of my emotions on my sleeve. It's very hard for me to hide things. Like you know, I think that you spend so much time with the people you work with, and it's important that they know who you are as a person, especially working in PR, and especially when you're so outward facing, that like that's what differentiates you from most of the people too, is like being able to connect with someone. And it's, you know, who do you want to be with on Monday morning at 9 a.m.? Like you want to be with someone that you can connect with, and that's like a real person. And yeah, some of my closest friendships are from jobs that I've had. And I think it was also such a huge part of me. And I think it's important that like this career path isn't the only thing that should be your goal. Like you should do things that like you love so much, and they're going to bring you to whatever else it is. If you don't do it for the rest of your life, like it still gives you those fundamental building blocks of like, okay, you were a professional ballet dancer, you know how to work hard, you know? So I think that, and she also knew everything that I'd been through. And yeah, it was, everyone I interview also, like for a job or whatever, I always like to know, where are you from? Like, where do you live? And like, you know, I guess like, I don't think those things are off limit. I think that they're really important. And I think that you should be yourself, you know, in every situation. So
absolutely. And it goes both ways of kind of how you said, you interviewing them, right? Do I want to work with you at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning? And then also vice versa. Like, likability is a huge part of why you will get hired or not, because they're inviting you to their team. You're going to be working late nights with them. You're going to be spending a lot of time with them. So as much as we like to think it's strictly qualifications, that likability aspect is just as important.
I think it's just as important, if not more important. I think that, like, at least for me, you can learn anything on a job if you're smart and you're hardworking. Like I would rather hire someone that's likable and that's kind and that has a really good attitude and really fun to be around, over someone that has like amazing experience. Like, especially when you're coming into like an assistant role or an internship perspective, like I can teach you what you need to know. It's more of like, do you want to be taught? Do you want to do it? And like, how fun are you to be around, or how likable are you to be around? How easy are you to be around?
Yeah, I've had guests say like making your boss's life easier, right? How can I make, you're an assistant, how can you make your boss's life easier? That is another way.
Yes, for sure. Yes, can't stress that. Like I remember when I was an assistant, I kind of went through this phase after about a year where I was like, I'm so much more qualified than this. I can be doing so much more. Like, why aren't they giving me more? And I kind of had this like perspective shift where I was like, my job is to make my boss's life easier, to do all of the work that no one else wants to do it with a really good attitude, and to get coffee and to like make everyone laugh. And like the second I kind of made that shift of like, oh, this is it. Like, this is all I have to do. And it like instantly I was happier. The people around me were happier. And I ended up getting promoted like a couple months later. So yeah,
definitely a different perspective there. So,
yeah.
Carly, so to give our listeners a little bit of perspective on what the next couple of years of Carly's career looks like, because I don't think there's any way we're going to get through everything that you've done. So you got your first, so Christian Louis Vuitton, you're a PR assistant. So you briefly mentioned how you started working at Louis Vuitton. You were a women's PR assistant and then promoted to coordinator. You were there for 2 years. Then you left and went to Calvin Klein as a PR manager for women's wear. You were there for 2 years, then moved to Carla Otto, where you were an account director for a year and a half. Then to Burberry, where you were senior PR manager for 2 years. And then to Hermès, where you were a senior PR manager, and then back to Louis Vuitton, where you were senior manager for entertainment and influencer relations.
Yes.
A whole lot of mouthful.
Did not get rid of that senior manager title either. It's like
it just stuck with you.
Yeah.
So I want to give that quick overview for our listeners, just to see how many different companies you worked with, fashion companies that you've worked with, luxury fashion companies worked with in the PR space, because it is a lot. What do you think, and we can maybe start with or is there any of these experiences that was most impactful to you, or is there anything kind of overarching that you learned during this time of you working at all of these different luxury fashion brands in New York and being in the PR scene?
So, as I've been a lot of places, and it has been in 2-year chunks for the most part. And I think that is very normal within the fashion PR space, as it's really hard to get promoted. They're jobs that everyone wants. They're really hard to get. And then when you get in there, people don't necessarily leave all the time. And so, what happened at Louis Vuitton was I really wanted to work for an American brand. I'd never worked for an American brand. And I knew I wasn't going to be promoted to a manager. It just wasn't going to happen. There wasn't a role for me. My boss had just started and I was going to be in that role for a long time. And so, when the Calvin opportunity came up, I took it, and it was, one of the best decisions I made, because I was working for an American brand in the head office, and you're making a lot of decisions. And it was it was almost like I was in a completely different career, and I wasn't just doing luxury. It's, Calvin Klein, it was denim, it was underwear, it was everything they have in Macy's. It was this whole other world that I knew nothing about. And I had to learn really, really quickly. And then you're also making way more decisions than being in a satellite office where you kind of take direction from a headquarters. So that was a really pivotal time for me. And it was also a time where, I think in a company like Louis Vuitton, where you're part of LVMH, you have a role, you stick to your role, you do not go outside of your lane whatsoever. And in a place like Calvin, where there's so much more freedom, and you want to do something and they say yes or no, and then you can just go and do it. It's just so much more freeing. And I had to really, really grow up quickly. And then I was managing a team of 3, and, it was almost like a boot camp in a different way. And then I ended up going to Carla Otto, which is, I always said, I'm never going to work at a fashion PR agency. I'm never going to do it, and never say never. I was there for about 2 years. I was working on the Celine account, which was, their biggest sort of luxury account. And it was when Phoebe Philo was the creative director. She ended up leaving, Celine. And so therefore Celine left the agency. So it was kind of at this point where I didn't have a lot to do, and I could have stayed at Carla Otto, and I loved it there. I had so much fun. I got to work on Off-White, and I got to work on, I worked on so many different brands. My mind was open to so many different things and meeting so many different people. And it was such a great, valuable experience that I said I would never do. I only work in-house. I'm not working for an agency. And it was the best experience because, again, I had to grow up really quickly. I was an account director. I had a team of 6. I had, you really are the face of, to the client. So I'm working directly with the global head of communications at Celine in Paris. And then you're working like, Virgil Abloh was the, creative director of Off-White. He also was at Louis Vuitton. You're texting directly with Virgil. It's like these
Oh my
relationships
gosh.
just, like, are insane. So I'm so happy that I took the job. And, when Celine left, they were like, listen, like, you can stay here. We'll give you other clients. Like, we don't have another Celine. And, I just was bored. I just was like, I can come here and I can get my paycheck, but I'm bored and I don't have enough to do. Someone at Burberry reached out to me, and it was when Riccardo Tisci was just moving over to Burberry, and I'm like a huge Riccardo Tisci fan. He's a designer. I'm like a huge fashion nerd. So I was like, oh my God, like I die for Riccardo, like this is amazing. And it was there that I think it was 2018, and I was overseeing men's and women's PR for all of North America. And it was when influencers were really, like, luxury was really starting to pay attention to influencers. And I was like, I want to know how to work with influencers, and I want to know how to do this, because I think that there's a time and place for magazines, and I think that they're still very important, but it's not how anyone consumes media anymore. And no one's going really to like a Harper's Bazaar or a Vogue per se, like the average person, to get their fashion news anymore. It's all on Instagram. And I kind of begged. I was like, can I please do influencers also? And my boss at the time was like, yeah, go for it. You want to do it? Like, I like really, really wanted it. I basically doubled my workload.
Oh my gosh.
I loved it. I had so much fun, and it was like doing strategy work of like, okay, we have a new bag. Like, we really want to push this bag. And it was really, really fun to be able to do PR and influencers at the same time. If you see this like whole map of like, okay, 6 months out, like we're going to do this, and this for PR. And then once it hits stores, we're going to do this huge gifting, and we're going to engage with all these influencers and do all these trips and all this stuff. But, getting those relationships with those influencers at Burberry was then what sort of got me every other role, because I had this experience and I knew all of these people. And, talk about likability. I mean, it's like, that's what that job is you have to be able to adapt and to listen. I'm not saying I'm the most likable person all the time, but I think it's being able to sort of adapt to what's going on, being able to read the room, being able to sort of like know what's going on.
Real quick, you mentioned that on this likability vein, you mentioned that these jobs, obviously in New York in the fashion luxury space, are really hard to get, right? Okay. You also mentioned that for pretty much all of these roles, someone reached out to you, right? You weren't actively on the job hunt. Someone reached out to you. Is that because your LinkedIn was updated? Is that because people knew you and recommended you, or how did that happen?
I think a lot of it was people knew me and recommended me. And yeah, I said this earlier, but the fashion world is so small, and it's even the people that you work with. So how the Burberry job came about was, there was another director at Carla Otto that I worked with, and he left and was working for a really massive fashion brand, and one of his really good friends was working at Burberry. And sort of like we all know each other, we all talk to each other. And so I think she sent a text or an email to her friends being like, hey, if you know anyone really good, we're looking for someone senior. And he gave her my name, and I didn't know he gave her my name. And he randomly reached out to me one night, and he's like, hey, what's your personal email? And he didn't tell me why. And they reached out to me. So yeah, I think a lot of it is, it's kind of this world where everyone moves around quite a bit. And when there is a really good job that comes up, it starts from inside first. I think that like you very rarely see a job that's on LinkedIn in luxury fashion that hasn't already been filled. And I think a lot of it is because it's so insular. And if you don't start in from an internship from the very, very beginning, it's really hard to break into. but yeah, I've been really, really, really lucky that a lot of it's just been through
Their
word of mouth.
recommendations.
Yeah.
We're gonna get back because you were transitioning to a good point in influencer marketing, but I just want to stop here for another second because so many women want your career or want to work in like fashion marketing and are applying to jobs on LinkedIn and are just having it's impossible. And so the reality of what you said isn't great, but I like that you said it because I hope that gives some people that are like, I'm applying to jobs and I'm getting rejected, like, what is wrong with me? And I always love that reminder of like nothing, like, it could be absolutely nothing. It's just that world seems to be very, very connected and is very referral based.
It is, yes. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with anyone. And when you see those jobs on LinkedIn, like they're most likely always already filled. Or they're in serious conversations with other people. And I think that it just is, if you want to be in that world, move to New York, move to LA with no plan, with no apartment, with nothing, and you figure it out. Like I moved with nothing, and you just have to be there. And I know that's like not the best answer, but like you just have to be there and you just have to like get in somewhere, anywhere, and just work really hard.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that your uncle was this, initial connection for you.
Mm-hmm.
But you also clarified that you're like, I'm not the horseback rider. My uncle was the horseback rider. And I think it's interesting to hear other guests, will share too, like, this random person or this random connection that I had was the way. And so I think if you are someone, you're like, oh, I really, I'd love to have a career like Carly. Like I want to be in fashion, but like I know nobody. I have no connections. I think a lot of people feel that way, but maybe like what you said is like one path, but making, like, you can go make connections. Like you can go get involved and do things in New York and meet people randomly who will hope like you, and you'll have a connection with who could then have another connection for you. Because I think it is, and if you have any other advice on this, it is really discouraging for people who feel like I have no connection to anybody in this world, yet I want to be a part of it so badly.
Yeah. I really think it's just getting to New York. And listen, I was really like lucky. I knew someone, I had my parents' support. Like I couldn't have done it without that. But I also knew that I basically had a year. So I graduated college a year early, and my parents said, you have a year to get a job. So, we will help you for a year and you do whatever you need to do. And so I kind of just like ran with certain things. Like it was like this, it's just like crazy. Like my uncle who rides horses, my uncle's like a heart surgeon in Memphis, Tennessee. Like he has no connection to the fashion world. Like he doesn't care at all. And he's like, oh, like my friends that I ride horses with, like they're great, like amazing dress designers. Like I think it's just, you never know who you're going to meet and who that connection is going to be. And even if you don't know anyone, it's like our world has gotten so much smaller. It's like DM someone on Instagram. Like I know that sounds like creepy and kind of crazy, but like you have access to kind of like anyone's contact information. Like just send them an email. Like it doesn't hurt. Like the worst thing that can happen is they don't answer, and I think that there's so much more accessibility into just at least getting people's contact information, or saying like, everyone wants to talk about themselves, so just like ask someone to get a coffee, or hey, like, do you have 30 minutes to hop on a phone call? Like, I'd love some advice. And like, listen, a lot of people aren't going to answer, but maybe one person will, that will then want to help you. So I think it just takes a lot of, putting your tail between your legs kind of. And like, I was like so shy and hated calling people and hated like all of it. And like, contrary to the job I've done for so long, like I'm actually very introverted, and I have to like turn on this switch that's completely different in my work world, but I would much rather like sit on my couch and not talk to anyone. So it's, yeah, I think it's just like using every single connection you have, meeting as many people as you can, and just like being there. So
yeah. And Carly, I love that you said too, you're an introvert. I'm an introvert too, but I also doesn't mean that I can't push myself outside of my comfort zone. I mean, oftentimes I have necessity for the work that I do, but you could still be an introvert and still find ways to like connect and put yourself out there and build those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go back here to this influencer marketing. So it sounded like at Burberry, you were kind of on the forefront, switching over to influence marketing when it was just this brand new thing.
Yeah. So I learned so much. I had the best time. I think that Burberry is such a good company to work for, and they really, they do take care of their employees. It was like the pandemic hit. In August of 2020, I got laid off. It just was the world that we were living in. And I've never gotten laid off from a job, and I think it was this like really, overwhelming time. And for a while I didn't work. We were in a global pandemic, and like the worst part of the pandemic when people were still like wiping down their groceries and no one knew what was going on. And so, I took that time. I didn't work for 10 months. And that's actually when I started freelancing though. And it just like projects would kind of come to me. People knew I was looking for work. I was reaching out to everyone, like anyone and everyone I knew. I was like, hey, I got laid off. I met you at this one meeting. It was like, I stalked everyone I knew, to try and just like have conversations with people. And then I ended up doing, a few freelancing roles, and that's sort of how like Baum Consulting came about. But I wasn't really ready to do that. And then I ended up going to Hermès, and I got the Hermès job because the VP of communications, he used to be an editor. So I would work with all the editors. So I knew him for years, and then he switched over into PR. So he had wanted me to come work with him at Hermès when I was still at Burberry. And I was like, listen, I'm really happy. Like, Hermès is amazing, but I'm really happy at Burberry. Like, I'm doing everything I want to do. And, I was like, but let's keep talking, and then, I was doing sort of, again, like PR, celebs, influencers, and Hermès is a very interesting company, is that their business model is no PR. You have to basically like beg to be able to buy a Birkin or, spend a certain money. And it's such a unique company that only works for Hermès, and they do it so well, and everything is so beautifully made, and it's such a heritage brand, and it's the epitome of luxury. And I can't say enough about like the working environment there. And it was like the most perfect of like, everyone was so nice and so kind, and the work-life balance was like, I would come in at 9, I would leave at 5, and like didn't look at my phone for the night. Like, truly very
sounds like a dream.
Yes. But I was bored because I like to work from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every night. I don't anymore. And no, I was really happy at Hermès. And my old boss at Louis Vuitton texted me one day, and she always texts me. She's like, I'm looking for a manager. My manager's leaving. I need someone. And I made a joke. I was like, me, I'll come. And she was like, no, really? And I was like, oh, I didn't think about it. I was like, well, you have to make the role more senior. Like, I at least need to be a senior manager. And I was like, and I want this certain salary, and that's what I'm worth. And they met me everywhere that I needed to be and wanted to be. And I think, when Louis Vuitton comes back to you, it's really hard to say no. And it was just more of the work that I wanted to be doing. And Virgil was still alive, and I had experience working with him, and I had been there before, and I have such like a love for the brand, and I know it's like, you work with the best of the best, and like everything is just like you're the Joneses, and it's like such a unique position to be in, but it's also such a hard position to be in because there's no room for mistakes. There's no room for errors. There's no amount of time and energy that goes into everything. And that's why it is the company that it is. And that was sort of like, you know, Hermès was really quick. I think I had not been working for a long time. I needed a job. I got the job. I was so excited about it. And I got really lucky. I think it's also way easier to get a job when you have a job. Catch 22. But yeah, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll quickly, I never would have left LV. I ended up getting engaged last year, and my fiance is Israeli, and he needs to be in Tel Aviv for his job. So we moved here a couple months ago, and yeah, it's just the nature of the job that you need to be in New York or Paris for it. And, you know, it was really, really bittersweet for me. And I'm still like have so much, like I have FOMO, like every award ceremony, I'm like texting everyone, like, it's amazing. And, but it's, you know, I think that I'm at this point where I'm entering a new chapter. I want to eventually start a family. And I think that for me, I always want to work. But right now when I'm consulting, I'm still doing the job I was doing at LV, just with smaller brands. And, you know, I am able to set my schedule. And, you know, I think when you're working for a big corporation, your life, your schedule, everything is that company's. And I think it's really valuable to do that for a certain amount of time. And it was just time for me to take a next step. So that's kind of like my journey in a very condensed version of it. But I forgot what the question was. I don't even know.
No, you're doing great. I mean, the way that you touched on all those experiences, I think was really beautiful. I wish we could honestly talk for like another hour because I have so many more questions for you. I hope though that this episode has, I mean, maybe inspired some people to want to get involved in this space because it does seem very exciting, but also maybe given people like a little bit of hope and like, okay, you know, kind of like once the snowball starts rolling, at least like for you, it pretty much had a detour for COVID, but it hasn't stopped. And yeah. Even with you adjusting your career to fit with your life, which I think is also really important to do, you can always, or I like think can go back or, you know, build this consulting experience. And you have built up just such an incredible reputation and career history that will likely that will stay with you and no one can take that. So I'm excited to see where you go. I'm excited for you to get married. Again, congratulations. How exciting. And again, thank you so much, Carly, for coming on the podcast. It has been such a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you. I had the best time. I'm excited to listen to it.